The Republican-led House Ethics Committee declined to release its report into former Congressman Matt Gaetz today. But tonight, we have new reporting on the allegations that Donald Trump's pick for Attorney General paid women for sex while in Congress. An investigative report in the New York Times, which has not been confirmed by NBC News, contains a document apparently from the Justice Department that Gaetz wants to run. The document, quote, established a trail of payments from Gaetz to women, including some who testified that Gaetz hired them for sex. The document itself is heavily redacted, a bit difficult to parse, but you can see the gist of it. It maps out lots of payments that Gaetz and an associate made to women, lots of them, including, the Times says, the two women whose lawyer told NBC News that they testified themselves before the House Ethics Committee that they had had sex with Gaetz in exchange for money. Gaetz denies those allegations. In response, a spokesperson for Donald Trump told the Times in part, this purposeful leaking of classified investigative materials is a sort of politicized DOJ weaponization that Matt Gaetz will end. New York Times notes the document had no classified markings and does not relate to national security. Michael Schmidt is the investigative reporter who broke this story for the New York Times, and he joins me now. Michael, I just want to set the table here. We've known that there was a Senate Ethics Committee investigation, and we've known that there was some sort of DOJ investigation into Gaetz. We've known that there have been allegations of paying for sex, and specifically having sex with a minor. He denies all this. What does your reporting shed light on?
What this basically does is it helps to bolster the credibility in the statements that these two women have made to investigators. As you were pointing out, their lawyer has been on television the past few days saying that these two women had testified to the House Ethics Committee about being paid for sex with Gaetz. And what this document shows, and we have an unredacted version of the document, we redacted it to make it public so people could see what this actually looks like. But what the unredacted version of it shows is thousands of dollars going from Gaetz to these to at least of these two women, including a third who has told authorities that she was paid for sex. Now, what this helps us understand is sort of how much money was going back and forth between Gaetz and these women. The lawyer says that the women would usually be paid between $500 to $1,000 or so for one of their encounters with Gaetz, which would sometimes include several days together and partying that went on during that. And so it gives us a larger sense here of how much money was going back and forth. The lawyer said ultimately these two women received a total of $10,000 from Gaetz, one $6,000, another $4,000. Putting all these facts aside, what this helps to show is what was going on inside of the federal investigation. This shows what federal investigators knew, the ability that they had to see into Gaetz' finances, and how they were able to establish that Gaetz was sending money to these women. And this is important because Gaetz has denied the allegations. He has said that none of this is true, that he never paid for sex. But this document, this Department of Justice document that was used in the investigation of Gaetz, shows money going from him to the women.
Yeah, and we should say that Mr. Leopard's the name of that lawyer who has two clients who he says, who your reporting indicates are some of the recipients of this money that's being paid by Gaetz, and that he says have testified, I think, in multiple venues, if I'm not mistaken, but certainly the Ethics Committee, under oath saying that they were paid for sex with Matt Gaetz. I believe one of them testified that she saw Matt Gaetz having sex with a minor, 17-year-old at the time, a woman that she's a friend of. Again, Gaetz denies all this. It seems that, what Gaetz's folks and what Trump's folks have been saying is like, well, they didn't charge him. He was, quote, cleared by the DOJ. And clearly they're correct that he was not charged for this, whatever the investigation bore out.
Correct. He was not charged. Others were. The chief accuser of his, a guy named Joel Greenberg, who was a local tax collector in Florida, pled guilty to this charge and cooperated against Gaetz and talked about how he had seen Gaetz have sex with a 17-year-old girl. One of the women of the, who is a client of the lawyer, Mr. Leppert, has told congressional investigators that she saw Mr. Gaetz have sex with a 17-year-old. It is true the department did not charge Gaetz, but what you're seeing, and if you think through it, it makes sense, is that if Gaetz's nomination goes forward, he will almost certainly, you'd have to think, be asked at his hearing, at his confirmation hearing, whether he had sex with women for money. And that will put him in a position where he will have to answer the question. He could also take the Fifth Amendment if he really thought that he had criminal exposure there and didn't want to answer it. But whatever he says to that answer will be really interesting, because obviously if he says yes, that means one thing. If he says no, he's contradicting witnesses and other evidence that backs them up. And if he takes the Fifth Amendment, you'll have an attorney general, if he's confirmed, who took the Fifth Amendment during his confirmation hearing.
Yeah, we should note here the obvious point in all this. Obviously, having sex with someone underage when you're a man in his 30s is illegal. Paying for sex is illegal. The Department of Justice is the chief law enforcement organ in the country and in the federal government, and he would be overseeing enforcement of that, not to mention the enforcement of the prohibition on Schedule I drugs, another part of what the Department of Justice does. Michael Schmidt, thank you very much.